Well, hi, Deconstructionist listeners. This is Science Mike, and before you get started with your beloved podcast, I've got a quick bit of exciting news to share with you. I'm going on tour this fall to support my new book, Finding God in the Waves, with a series of special events, including Ask Science Mike live appearances. The dates announced so far are going to be in Tallahassee, Denver, Nashville, Columbus, Atlanta, Chicago, and Grand Haven, as well as Portland. Now, if you're going to come to any of those, I'd love to see you, but pay special attention to the Columbus, Ohio event, because I heard that the Deconstructionist crew themselves are going to be there. So I'd love to hang out with you and the hosts of one of my favorite podcasts at the same time. You can learn more by going to findinggodinthewaves.com/tour. Thanks, and I hope to see you soon.
Here I wait, keeping up the gardens, stay away my fate.
The Deconstructionist podcast is produced by Nicholas Rowe at the National Audio Preservation Society Recording Studio in Newark, Ohio.
Follow us on social media at www.thedeconstructionist.com, on Facebook at Deconstructionist Podcast, Twitter at DeconstructCast, and Instagram at Deconstructionist Podcast.
If listening to this podcast has benefited you in any way, consider making a donation. Even the smallest donations go to help John and I maintain healthy relationships with our wives and keeps their blood pressure at a healthy level. The donate link is in the show notes, or you can visit our website and click the donate tab.
How could you be somewhere as beautiful as the earth? My heart is full, but still no one to share.
Welcome, everybody, to the Deconstructionist podcast. We've got yet another.
This one was fun, man. They're all fun, but
I wish this would have been video.
I was a little bit in nerd heaven
It was fantastic.
right there. I was like, oh, I get to talk about all the nerdy stuff that my nerd hobby, and get it all out of my system. It was a lot of fun, and I think
Tell us about your crush here, man.
well, first I'll say who.
Yeah.
This individual that we had on is Dr. Deborah Haarsma. She is the president of BioLogos. She's held this position for a few years now. She was previously a professor and chair in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at Calvin College. And she's
an astrophysicist, right?
Yeah, and her job was to study, how did she put it?
Exoplanets?
Exoplanets and formation of galaxy
Formation
clusters,
of galaxy clusters.
but
that's right.
not the ones you can see. So not the ones in our galaxy, but in distant galaxies that they have to use crazy telescopes for. And
we definitely talked about that.
For sure,
quite a bit in this.
So she's got a really interesting. Well, I mean, BioLogos in general. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that is?
BioLogos is, everybody should check this out. Go to www.biologos.com. If you're spiritually curious and science-minded, it is going to be nerd heaven for you. There are lectures, resources, materials. It is essentially a theological, scientific think tank that was started by Francis Collins a while back. Francis Collins is the world-renowned scientist that led the team that mapped the human genome. And he is just a complete badass.
Yeah.
And he started BioLogos because, this idea that science and spirituality are competitive really is just a pop culture disinformation that's gotten out there. It's just one of those nasty rumors. It's like a tabloid rumor about this nasty love affair, between science and spirituality. And so BioLogos really seeks to, unlike some organizations out there that will remain nameless. They try to have the utmost integrity in both science and faith, and they allow the two to form each other. They don't start with any rigid premises that really make science hard to do or make faith hard to do. I think they're fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, all of them are really, really highly respected in their specific fields. And Dr. Haarsma's got some really cool work out there that you can check out too. So obviously, check the show notes. We'll have all of her social media and her website, the link to BioLogos. You can follow them on Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff. But she's also written a couple books. Most recently, Origin: Christian Perspectives on Creation, Evolution, and Intelligent Design. So obviously, that's a hot topic out there. So it's very interesting from a Christian science perspective here, not to be confused with the place that I always thought was a bookstore.
The Christian Science Reading Room?
Yeah, I was like, oh, so it's like a Christian library that you can go to.
I'm laughing so hard because I thought the same thing.
No, for years.
I was like, cool.
Well, because they don't look like churches either. They look like what a librry would look like. So it's not my fault.
I was walking downtown Cincinnati. I think I was like 18 years old. And I was like, this place looks really cool. And then I brought it up to my parents, and they're like, no.
Please do not go in there. But yeah, so I mean, she's got some really cool stuff out there. She also participated and contributed to the Faraday Institute's film Test of Faith, which is a really cool documentary. Just a ton of really well-respected scientists and talking about, again, how science and faith do not contradict one another and do go hand in hand. So check that out.
Oh man, this is fantastic. We get into a lot of really juicy, nerdy conversation here about all kinds of things. And the reason that we wanted to have Dr. Haarsma on the Deconstructionist podcast is because we are super curious, and I think everybody is in some way, shape, or form. I mean, we live in a scientific culture. Scientific discoveries all the time are changing the way we live our lives, changing the way we share a common life, changing the way we relate to ideas of faith and politics and ethics. And these things are all entangled ideas, and it always seems to be a big, problem for people that are, it's just like this awkward kind of intersection of ideas that people are always like, they don't know how to talk about. And we need to confront our biases. We need to hear different perspectives. And we've got more scientists lined up for the future. And we are going to continue to just listen to different competing, grace-filled, open perspectives. And Dr. Haarsma was absolutely fantastic. And I can't wait to roll tape on this.
Dude, she seems to fit this theme that we have that we didn't even expect, which is people in their respective fields just having really awesome personalities. I mean, I could have listened to her talk all day.
All day.
And not just because, she told me about black holes and galaxy formations.
We talked about some stuff, man.
Yeah, so if
and
you
then
like
the spiritual
science,
intersections. I love people that can talk
Beautiful.
about both. It is awesome.
Yeah.
It's so great. So, without further ado,
Yeah.
here we go. We got Dr. Deborah freaking Haarsma. Deb Haarsma, thank you so much for being with us here today on the Deconstructionist podcast. We are just delighted to have you.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So one of the ways we like to kind of get started is instead of rambling ourselves about all the stuff we've read about you on blogs and interviews and things like that, we just love to give our interviewees a chance to just kind of tell people who they are and who are you, what kind of work do you do, and how did you start to come to the place where you're doing what's your story? How did you get to where you are doing the work you're doing now?
Oh, well, let's see. By training, I am an astronomer. So I'm a scientist. I study galaxies in the universe. And for many years, I taught astronomy and physics at Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But a few years ago, I became president of BioLogos, which is a science and faith organization. Our mission is to invite the church and the world to see the harmony between modern science and biblical faith. And I've always had a passion for the intersection of science and Christianity, how those things fit together, synergize in positive ways, figuring out what's going on in the areas of where there seems to be conflicts and tension. And I just love sharing that with the church and with scientists, with anybody, to share the wonders of the universe and what they show us about God.
Oh man! So how did you how did this this interest between the intersection of science and faith, how did that kind of grow and develop in you? If you don't mind, give us a little bit of your kind of personal background into how that became a passion of yours.
Yeah, well, let's see. I always loved math and science. So my dad would play math games with my brother and me when we were little. And let's see, in high school, I think is when I first really started wondering how these would fit together. So I grew up in a Christian home and in an evangelical church. And so the only view I knew of about Genesis was that it was the young Earth interpretation, that the Earth and the universe really literally began 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. And I thought the Big Bang and evolution were just bad words, just equivalent of atheism. But then I had high school biology class at my public high school, and here in the textbook it was describing evolution. So I knew evolution was wrong, but some of this kind of made sense, so I was confused. And I brought it home, and I brought it home to my dad, and I kind of explained to him, here's what the textbook's saying, what's going on, and here we are sitting at the kitchen table, textbook open in front of us, and going back and forth. And after a while, I still remember this. He kind of just sat back and said, "I don't know." And
Whoa!
Wow!
Yeah, and I remember this feeling of relief in my shoulders, just like, oh, it's okay to not know. I thought we had to have an answer for this,
Yeah.
So I think I was like a lot of teenagers and I mean, just a lot of Christians were just like, well, what's the right answer? Tell me the right answer. And here was my dad, who I respected as my father and as a Christian, and he was clearly not floored by this. His faith wasn't thrown into a total tailspin. He felt okay saying, I don't know. And that just really helped me then. For many years after that, I just kind of put the whole issue on the back burner and just focused on, learning more physics. I ended up going into the physics area of science and growing in my faith in other ways. So that was a key moment for me. Another moment was in college. I went to a Christian college, Bethel in Minnesota, and there was a chapel speaker, and I had forgotten his name, but he was talking about what it means to be a Christian in different fields, and God's calling for some people to be Christians in academia, at universities, doing science or studying other things. And up till that point, I'd never heard this really compelling picture of how science could be a Christian vocation, how I could be a Christian witness as a scientist, how I could do it from a Christian perspective. And it was just eye-opening for me. I'm like, okay, that's what God is calling me to do. And so I went off to graduate school and studied science there. And at that point, I connected with a lot of people from InterVarsity, Graduate Christian Fellowship. That was active there. I was a graduate student at MIT. And there was also an active group at Harvard, which is just down the road. And these groups would get together, and several of us were interested in these questions. And so that gave me a wonderful community to be a part of as we would read books and discuss them over lunch. And I'm still friends with several of those folks from that era. And that helped me work through a lot of issues. And it was then that I came to understand better how Genesis could be understood in its ancient context, what the cultures were like at that time, and I came to really have a deeper understanding of God's intentions in Genesis, what he was communicating to us, and that just helped so much. And once I learned some of those things, I just developed a great passion to share this with the church. I wanted to share the science with the church. I wanted to share what I'd learned about the Bible. How come nobody had told me this before? And that sense of calling has driven a lot of my work since then.
Wow,
man.
We definitely want to hit on some of what you just said just now, especially when it comes to young Earth theory and Big Bang theory and how a lot of us were raised kind of in that under that same idea that these things cannot work alongside of Scripture and the Bible and that sort of thing. Before we move on, though, for the layperson out there listening, you mentioned your field is astronomy, and so. For a lot of us, that's kind of murky. We just assume, does she look at through a telescope and stare at stars all day. What specifically are you working on currently? What is it that you're studying?
Well, so I'm not currently doing a lot of research, but my area has been in is galaxies and the universe. So when you look, yeah, it's it's been really fun to study some of the biggest things in God's creation. So when you look up at the night sky, the stars that you see are mostly relatively close to Earth. They're in our local part of the galaxy. Now, when you see the band of the Milky Way, you're seeing the band of stars that is our galaxy, a couple 100 billion stars in the Milky Way. But in my research, that stuff was all just nearby. What I was interested in was much further beyond, entirely separate galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars. And those galaxies don't hang out just individually. They tend to appear in groups and clusters. And so I studied some of the largest clusters of galaxies in the universe, which would have thousands of galaxies in them. Those would be the largest gravitationally bound objects. And also in the earlier stage of my career, I studied the expansion rate of the universe. I studied how light bends in gravitational fields. So a lot of cool topics I've had a chance to delve into.
Oh, that's like way beyond cool.
And we will definitely have some questions for you. We'll do our second ever lightning round at the end if you're ready for that. But
quick question that you probably can't really even answer in a short time on a podcast. But when you say you're studying, galaxies beyond stars, which are already so far away, like what instruments do you like? How do you see that? Like what? I'm like, what? Sounds like science fiction. I'm like a philosophy theology nerd. I don't know a lot about science, so I'm just like, how do you? How?
Well, there are ways to encounter this stuff. So you might have seen pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope. So that's an orbit around the Earth, and it is very sensitive, and it's able to see things very far away in the same wavelengths that our eyes see. So some of the galaxies that I studied have been photographed by the Hubble Space Telescope, and that can see to galaxies that 13 billion light years away and more. So just to rewind for a second, a light year is a distance. It's the distance that light can travel in a year, traveling at the speed of light. So in our solar system, light travels, it's several minutes from the sun to the Earth. But to other galaxies, to those nearby stars I talked about in our galaxy, those would be 25, 100, maybe 1,000 light years away. But these distant galaxies that I studied would be millions or a billion light years away.
Wow.
Now,
Wow.
you asked what instruments. I actually mostly studied these at wavelengths beyond what our eyes can see. And this isn't fiction. This is real science. So light comes in different wavelengths, different colors in the visible part of the spectrum, but light can also come in infrared versions and ultraviolet. And you can extend beyond that to radio waves, X-rays. Those are all just light, but at different wavelengths and different energy levels. So I studied using radio telescopes and X-ray telescopes and infrared telescopes, and all of those give different insights into how these galaxies look. I was always amazed at how different a galaxy would look at radio wavelengths than at visible wavelengths. So here it is emitting radio waves, these very low energy light waves, but you see entirely different structures than you would see in the photograph taken with an optical camera. So it just showed us new insights into the universe.
Oh my gosh.
That's so cool. By the way, having nothing at all to do with anything, I was the nerdy kid in grade school who, when we had a raffle in class, everybody was like waiting and hoping that they would strike it lucky and get the Nerf gun. And I was the one who was like, I really hope nobody takes the Comet cassette tapes that I really want. And of course, it was still there. I mean, but that was a concern that I had. I'm like, I'm not going to get the Comet tapes. No,
Brilliant.
I got the Comet tapes. So.
Brilliant.
So, kind of going back to what you talked about previously, most scientists at this point in time accept some sort of theory, like the Big Bang theory, in terms of creation. And kind of along with that, when we spoke with Catherine Hayhoe about a month ago or so, she was talking to us about an anthropologist that did a study on the number of scientists who actually have some sort of life of faith.
Oh, Elaine Eklund?
Oh, who was it? Oh, yeah. And she mentioned that despite popular belief, a large majority of scientists do have some sort of faith, which is completely the opposite of what we've thought for so long. So at this point, could you maybe kind of talk about the Big Bang Theory? Because I know you mentioned in one of your blogs how it's not it doesn't contradict the Bible, rather. But I wondered if you could expand on it a little bit and explain how is that possible?
Yeah, everybody thinks it contradicts.
Right. Well, so the Big Bang Theory refers to a scientific model, first of all. So scientists would use that in the same way they might use words like photosynthesis or biochemistry or gravity. It's a scientific model that describes how things work in the universe. Now, in a lot of everyday language, and including in the faith context in which I grew up, Big Bang Theory was used to refer to an atheistic worldview that said the universe created itself, it just came into being, and there is no God. It was something that was, the Big Bang Theory ruled out God. And that's attributing all sorts of things to a scientific theory when science is just not capable of addressing those kinds of questions.
Right.
So one thing that I often repeat in my talks and in conversations is that a scientific explanation does not replace God. So we have a scientific explanation for lots of things, like for the orbit of planets around the sun. We can map that out in incredible detail. We understand exactly how the gravity works. We can predict it. We can measure it. But as Christians, we still believe that God governs the orbits of the planets. We don't usually see those as contradictory statements. We see them as two different kinds of explanation for the same thing that are both true. And I would see the Big Bang in the same way. So on a scientific level, the Big Bang is describing how the universe developed from just after the first instant to the present day, how it expanded over time, how it started in a very hot and dense environment, and then that gradually cooled as it expanded, and stars formed, and then galaxies formed, and so forth. And that's a whole scientific description. But then if I step back as a Christian, I can look at that and say, oh, well, that gives me a description of what God was doing. God was governing this whole process, and I can understand it on a scientific level, and I can also praise God for it and marvel at his sovereignty and his plan and intention when I look at it through the eyes of Christian faith.
That's good.
Man, that is so good.
So along with that, do you see this kind of I don't know. We wouldn't even. I would say Adam and I wouldn't even necessarily call it this a disagreement, because I think we would say, if pressed, that the two kind of inform one another. They answer two entirely different questions. But do you see this as a time issue? Kind of like when Galileo first came out and said, "Look, the Earth is not the center of the universe." And eventually, over time, at first he was obviously ostracized, but eventually, over time, people kind of came around, especially through the advent of technology, like, look, we can show you now.
No thanks to the church.
Yeah. So do you see this kind of weird fight as something that, over time, do you think people will kind of warm to?
Is it dissipating? Is the conflict dissipating?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. So yes, you're right. In the Galileo era, Galileo, with the first one to really point the telescope at the heavens and see the implications of it, he discovered this evidence that the Earth is moving through space and it's going around the sun. And that was contrary to what people thought and what people thought the Bible was teaching. And so there was a lot of discussion over it. Of course, it was amplified by a whole lot of politics, church disputes, annoying personalities, all sorts of things came into play. It wasn't just the arguments. By the way, today, the Catholic Church is a major sponsor of astronomical research. They fund the Vatican Observatory,
yes.
And so yes, we came a long, long way on that issue. Now we have issues of the Big Bang for the age of the Earth and the universe, But actually, it goes back to the 1600s when there were the first geologists in the 16 and 1700s. They were Christians who went out looking for evidence of a young Earth and of a global flood. And they looked and looked, and the more they studied the rocks, the more convinced they became, no, actually, these are very long, very gradual processes that we're seeing. And they came to change their view of that as well and came to a different understanding of the biblical passages. So in both of those cases, the church, for the large part, revised how they understood Scripture. Now, I don't want people to think, though, that, well, we just make a scientific discovery and now we change our minds about the Bible. Because I don't think that's really what's going on. I think what's going on is that as we look at Scripture, in every era, we bring our cultural biases to it, and we bring our presumptions and assumptions. And sometimes we need our blinders removed. And when we consider, when we consider things in the natural world, that's also God's revelation to us, and it's a way of helping us correct some errors we have in how we are seeing the Bible. And it's not just the physical sciences are science. It's also, say, modern economics has helped us understand, some parts of the Bible as well. The Bible is pretty firm in saying you shouldn't lend to others and collect interest. But what do we do in our modern Western culture? We're doing that all the time. But we have a different way of understanding that now because we've seen different ways of how economics works. So God uses a lot of His general revelation through human culture and through the natural world to help us understand Scripture better and get at a deeper understanding of it. So I see those things from outside the Bible as prompting us to look at the Bible more closely. But I think it's only good biblical scholarship that is internal to the Bible and internal to Christian theology that's going to help us know what the new, good, better interpretation is. I don't think science can really tell us that. So that's how I see the interplay between those. I'm not sure if I answered the question you asked.
Oh, no, that was
great.
That was a brilliant answer.
Okay.
That was a really, really, really great answer. Thank you very much. I'm curious. I'd love to just get your take. We spend a lot of our time talking to philosophers and theologians, and I've always been more of a theology nerd, and John's been a little bit more of a science nerd, even though we both kind of overlap a little bit. But from more of I'd love to ask you a theological question and hear your more science-minded answer. Why do you think that this divide kind of started, and when do you think it kind of started to become a problem? Like, why is this such a hot topic? I mean, if you think about hot topics in Christianity, there aren't many. I mean, it's issues of sexuality, issues of heaven and hell, and issues of the age of the earth. I mean, there's only a few taboos. Not much has changed. So when did this, in your opinion, become such a problem?
Oh, that is really interesting. If you think back, it used to be baptism was a huge issue. People went, and that's more essential to the core of our theology. I think there were wars fought over it, people killed at the stake over it. My own Anabaptist ancestors, churches splitting over whether you're going to sprinkle or dunk people, and that's not even getting into adult versus infant baptism.
Yeah.
And when do we talk about that now? I guess that issue gives me some hope for the future that the church could get to a place where maybe some of the things that are so burning today could become issues where the church can live with multiple perspectives and not see that as dividing us or as central to the gospel. Because I think the gospel is bigger than all of the issues that you mentioned there. So how did this one get to be a problem? Well, I think it's
just in your opinion.
Yeah. It's been this as all these scientific discoveries come in. It's also at the same time that we have the Enlightenment and then postmodernism. There's all sorts of interesting interactions that the historians of science and the cultural historians will point out. Sometimes it's just a few loud voices that give us a distorted impression of what's going on. So you have in the late 1800s these books on the warfare between science and Christianity that actually included a lot of outright falsehoods about what had actually happened in the Galileo era and later, but it left this amazing impression that everybody just latched onto, like, oh, yep, science and faith, they're at war, they can't go together. But other voices in the late 1800s, like B.B. Warfield, some of the great faith leaders there, they took a serious look at the new science of evolution. Darwin's theory was 1859, and in the decades following that, a lot of Christian leaders looked at that and said, yeah, there's something to that, and we should be considering this as Christians. We can fit this with our faith. So then it was the fundamentalists in like the 1910s and 20s in there.
Yeah.
Even they, in a lot of those writings and that series of books, the fundamentals, there were people who were open to an old earth, even open to some evolutionary processes. So this impression we have today that Christians, that faithful Christians going back thousands of years always believed that the earth was literally 6,000 years old, that's not actually the case. Some of our great leaders of faith did not think that. Even leaders in the 20th century, C.S. Lewis and Billy Graham, many of them were certainly open to evolution even, and an old universe certainly. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's
great.
some of how I see that changing over time. But yet, if I look back on the last 10 or 20 years, what I see is voices just getting more polarized, I think, on how strongly people feel about their points of view. So, yeah, that's a few
I agree. That's great. Thank you for that commentary.
So, you ready to go a little sciencey here?
I'm always ready for science.
Excellent. All right. So I personally feel like right now, in this current time period, is such a cool time for science. Whether we're talking about recent scientific discoveries or just kind of this renewed interest in the subject in general, with shows like with Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson. That I thought was exceptionally well done, to the discovery of gravity waves, dark matter, dark energy, just some really interesting things happening in the world of science right now. Maybe you could kind of go into, and actually, before I forget, multiverse theories, which absolutely just made my head explode.
Yes.
The first time I heard about that. I think we've mentioned this before. Anybody who's seen the first episode of the new Cosmos, where they kind of go into multiverse theory or theories, I think got very, very afraid, and then and felt very small all at the same time. So,
I just went catatonic.
Yeah. So, just out of curiosity, if you could maybe talk a little bit about what is dark energy and dark matter, because to the extent of my layman's knowledge of this kind of subject, it comprises about 95% of the universe, and we have no idea what it is.
Well, that's correct. So, yes, this is one of the exciting discoveries that in my own field, that I've been able to watch close up over the last 20 years. So 20 years ago, I was a graduate student, and the debate over the expansion rate of the universe was, and the age of the universe was going strong. So there were, among professional astronomers, competing camps of values that differed by like a factor of 2. So some people thought the universe was like 10 billion years old. Others thought maybe 20 billion. A few people argued for values in between, but people were separating out into different camps. And then some of the new telescopes came online. We've got new measurements that nailed down some of the properties of the universe very precisely. The expansion rate, the amount of matter in the universe, and then how that expansion rate is changing over time. And those numbers give us a much more precise measure of the age of the universe. And we now know it is 13.8 billion years old, plus or minus 0.05, I think it is. Oh, I should have looked that number up.
Holy cow.
Yes, We know it incredibly precisely. Um,
That is amazing.
to less than 1% uncertainty, when it used to be a factor of 2 that we were debating. And I've been able to see that progression and to see the consensus build among the astronomical community as we saw, that theory that people used to argue for, that doesn't work, that one doesn't work. But hey, this one that seemed so wacko, that actually is working, and more evidence for it. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's been an exciting time. Now, you asked a little more detail about dark matter and dark energy. So, dark matter is the stuff in the universe that has mass, but does not emit light, and it doesn't block light. It just doesn't interact with light at all. Now, we now know how much matter there is in the universe. We also know pretty well how much matter there is of the ordinary kind of matter. So ordinary matter is the stuff you know from the periodic table that you saw in your chemistry classroom, the hydrogen and helium, the carbon and nitrogen and oxygen, all the stuff in our bodies, all the stuff in the planet Earth. This is ordinary matter. That makes up 4% of the universe. Then there's another, only 4%. And then there's another 26 or so, 22%, something in there. Oh, guys, I'm sorry, I don't have the precise numbers in front of me, but it's right in there.
Ballpark's good.
Ballpark
good.
Figures. I could get you the full technical references with uncertainty values if you would like. Anyway, it's the dark. So we know that there's a portion of this matter that's not the ordinary kind. It's some other weird kind of matter, and we're narrowing in on what it must be. It's likely some kind of strange elementary particle left over from the Big Bang. There's been a lot of experiments done to rule out various possibilities of what it could be, to understand its properties better. And so we're narrowing in on what dark matter could be. I'm hoping in my lifetime that we will be able to say, this is what dark matter is. That would be very cool.
Sub nerd question here. How do you observe it? How do you observe it to figure out what it is if it doesn't interact with light?
Oh, A+ question. Yes. Well, that's the challenge. So what you can observe is how it affects other things. So one place you can see the dark matter is in our own galaxy. You can see the stars orbiting around the center of the galaxy. So by their orbit, you know how much mass must be there that's keeping them in orbit. But you can also look at what you see there. You can, count the stars, look at how much gas there is. You add up how much mass is in that stuff, and you go, that's not enough. I see these stars, they're going in orbit, but they seem to be held there by something other than the stuff that we can see. And by that, we measure how much of the dark matter there must be. And you can see it.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's one of the ways that we know. And there's actually multiple other ways. That's another neat thing about dark matter is we have a couple of different ways of measuring where it is and how clumpy it is and things like that. And that, so we know it's there. And we might be able to figure out what it is. Now, dark energy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dark energy is, that we discovered more recently. And it's kind of a catchphrase that got used. There used to be a lot of different possible terms for it, and then we kind of settled on dark energy as the term for whatever it is that's causing the universe to speed up in its expansion. So it was in the late 90s that we got confirmation that the universe is accelerating. Its expansion is speeding up over time. And that's when all the astronomers went, what? Really? No. Because everybody thought, we know there's matter in the universe that's attracting everything gravitationally. It should be slowing down. And here, they measured that it was speeding up. And I remember going to lectures where the data were presented in a compelling way, and a lot of the senior astronomers in the audience were raising their hand and asking very probing questions about this or that possible observational error, instrumental problem. Are you sure it's not this? Are you sure it's not that? Because this was really a surprise. But then, the data was convincing, and multiple groups discovered it. So we know the universe is accelerating in its expansion. Since then, we've learned much more in detail how that acceleration is working. So we know there's this dark energy. We know a little bit about its properties. but there's still a lot of unanswered questions around it. So if ordinary matter is about 4% and dark matter is around 25-ish%, the rest of the stuff in the universe is dark energy, but we don't know really what it is.
Oh, man.
Do you want to hear how I think about this in my faith?
Yes,
Yes.
of course we want to hear
Of course
that.
you do. So I think this is one of the really cool things about being a scientist, and informs how I think about God. I was giving a talk on this kind of stuff a couple years ago at a church, and here comes this high school student and her dad, and they came up to me and they said, "Isn't it cool how the more you learn in science, the more there is to discover?" And they were talking about how when you're a little kid, you look up at the moon and go, "Wow, look at that." And in elementary school, you can learn your constellations. And you get to college and you start learning how stars have lifetimes and change over their lives, and what its properties of how planets form and things like that. And then you get to research astronomers, and they're like, yeah, I understand all that, but what is this dark energy stuff? And there's always more to learn. It's not like the universe is just this wallpaper up there and you poke at it and that's all it is. It's incredibly rich. There's always more to discover. And that stretches my curiosity and my wonder and my humility, because the way we think it is sometimes how it isn't. And all of those are like encountering God. There's always more to discover about God. The unending depths of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. I've barely scratched the surface. I'm like, a kindergartner in how I understand all there is to know about God. And there's always more to learn. The mystics of the early Christian church spent their whole lives pondering God, and still there is more to learn and more to grow. And science reminds me of that.
Oh,
Wow.
I could listen to you talk about this all day.
I think you just dropped the mic.
Yeah. And led us into our next question, which is perfect. I can honestly say within my lifetime, I can recall as a child the fact that black holes were still kind of a theory at that point. They hadn't been proven. It was kind of these advanced mathematical equations that are well beyond my capacity of understanding. That they're trying to prove that these black holes existed at the center of galaxies, but didn't have the technology at that point in time. And then as the years went on, we created the Hubble Space Telescope and the Kepler and all these really high-powered telescopes, and now we're able to confirm, that theory that there are in fact, black holes, whether they're active or inactive. And I just remember thinking that was such a neat thing to see the progression of theory to fact. Now that they've been able to prove it as technology is advanced, and then I see multiverse theories have obviously kind of taken off now. Where one of the theories, and I couldn't honestly tell you which one, but one of them basically suggests that there may be other universes within these black holes, if I heard this correctly. And I think to myself, well, of course there would be.
Yeah.
This divine creator, of course he would continue to create infinitely. So I don't know how much you get into multiverse theories, but is there a particular one that you really kind of latch onto, and is there one that maybe you could kind of break down to childlike minds such as ours?
Well, you've got a handle on the basics here already. For one thing,
Oh, thank you.
yes, you're already realizing there are multiple theories of the multiverse. It's actually been pretty interesting how from some very different areas of astronomy and physics and mathematics that people have come up with this idea that there would be other universes. And these different theories don't always fit together very well, although people try to do that too. The one that how to say this, first of all, I love it that you as pastors and faith leaders are thinking about the multiverse, because this is something we don't have proof of it yet. We don't have a great a test that can say yes, it definitely is. But it's an idea that people are talking about in the scientific community, and I think it's great when the church can be in tune with that and not be behind the game and the conversation, but be thinking ahead to what implications there might be down the road if one of these theories of the multiverse is confirmed, and so we're thinking ahead about the implications. So the one that I find most interesting, I will say, I guess, is the one that's based on the inflationary theory of the early universe. So I mentioned earlier that the universe is expanding and is accelerating in its expansion. But the inflationary theory of the early universe refers to a moment in the very tiniest first fraction of a second in which the universe was expanded by an incredible amount for just a tiny fraction of a second. And it sounds wacko. What would cause the universe to just rapidly expand like that? And why would it stop? And what's going on? And why would you even think that? But that theory was proposed to actually answer some of the questions that the evidence in the universe raises about why things look the way they do, why the sky looks so similar in every direction, for instance. And the inflationary theory of the early universe was proposed to explain those. But people weren't sure how seriously to take this until they said, okay, yeah, great, you explained some existing data. But the inflationary theory also predicted other kinds of observations, especially about the microwave background radiation. So the background radiation of the universe, the cosmic background, is this heat radiation left over from the early stages of the universe. It's coming at us from all directions. It's in the microwave part of the spectrum, which is light with wavelengths a little bit shorter than radio waves. And in that part of the spectrum, when you point a telescope at the sky, you see almost identical emission all the way around, but with these very faint little ripples in it. And the structure of those faint ripples has been one of the most exciting discoveries in cosmology in the last 20 years. We've had a succession of instruments that have given measurements of those at ever greater precision. And the structure of those ripples turns out to exactly match the predictions of the inflationary theory of the early universe. It's confirmed those predictions. So,
what?
Yes. So it turns out this really bizarre idea turns out to be a good match. Now, here's where it gets even more strange, though. The inflationary theory, most versions of the inflationary theory, predict that there would also be other universes, that not just our universe had this very rapid inflation in the first instant, but that other bubbles would have expanded rapidly as well. So there would be other universes, and that they would have somewhat different physical properties than our universe.
Oh, man.
So that's what is really hard to get our heads around. And I have heard, just in a purely scientific context, debates about, is this science or not? And it wasn't even people bringing religious worldviews into the question. It was like, is it science if we can't test this prediction? So inflation's making some predictions that have been confirmed, and it makes this other prediction of a multiverse, but we're talking about other universes. That's beyond what we can measure because we can only see things in our universe. So what does it mean to study another universe? Like, it can predict they're there, but if you can't confirm that prediction, is that even science? Some people say, well, yeah, it's a prediction. Other people say, well, no. So that's an active debate in the scientific community from what I'm seeing.
Wow. That is, I hope our listeners just pause at this point so they're safe in their cars and they're not dropping their exercise equipment or whatever it is they're doing. That's some good juice right there, man.
Yeah. if you didn't enjoy that, there's no hope for you.
Oh my gosh. All right, I'm gonna do my best to try to formulate a question here that ties back a couple of the things that you've said into a curiosity that I have. So early on when we were talking here, you had mentioned this this thing that discovery does, that it continues to break things open, and it continues. So, we thought we understood this about Scripture, but then, as a lot of people, Francis Schaeffer is one of my heroes, and a lot of others, your work at BioLogos, things like that. As we discover more about the natural world that we believe God created, that turns us back to Scripture to say, okay, let's open that up and see what other interpretations there could be. So there is this initial, I think, arrogance that we all have as human beings. C.S. Lewis called it chronological snobbery, and there's just always been this air of arrogance to, science does it, faith does it, we all do it. We're like, okay, this is it. This is what it is, and now we're gonna freeze this and build on it and institutionalize it. And there's this sort of arrogance, and the arrogance in science is, because we know this, then these things about faith can't be true. But then the arrogance in biblical literalists, or even just other people of faith, that say, well, because I have this interpretation of Scripture, then none of that stuff in science can be true. And I want to tie that back to what you said about mystery, and then ask you a question, that there are all these things, dark matter, dark energy, multiverses, all these discoveries that are continuing to break everything open. And there's a quote in Stephen Hawking's Brief History of Time that said, toward the end, he said, in Newton's time, it was possible for an educated person to have a grasp of the whole of human knowledge, at least in outline form. But since then, the pace of the development of science has made this impossible. Sorry, all that to say, here's my question. In this time of rapid discovery that leads to more and more and more and exponentially more questions, do you think it's time that we all develop some humility? And I wonder if you could give us some thoughts on that, because I think humility and the need for mystery, which you'd referenced the mystics, might be the key to all of us just chilling out a little bit and allowing things to happen. What are your thoughts on that? I know that was a long question.
No, you're bringing together a lot of great ideas. So Christ calls us to humility. So as people of faith who follow Jesus Christ, is one of the fundamental things that he calls us to. If we are to be like Christ, we must be like the one who is God, who set aside all of his power in governing this vast universe or multiverse and became a human infant, nearly powerless, and set that all aside for our sakes. And we have to be willing to be incarnate to others, to set aside the arrogance that you mentioned, our power, and be willing to listen, to learn, to walk in another's shoes, and to be curious. So one way we're doing that at BioLogos is we have been deliberately in dialogue with Christians who hold other views on science. So we're actually working on a book that's growing out of several conversations we've had with the group Reasons to Believe. This is a Christian organization led by Hugh Ross. They accept the great age of the universe, but they differ with BioLogos in our view of evolution. So Reasons to Believe thinks there are serious problems with biological evolution. At BioLogos, we see that there's robust evidence for the common ancestry of all life, and we believe evolution. We see evolution as a process that God used to create life, that God crafted and designed the evolutionary process with intention to bring about the complex life that we see today. So, but in this dialogue, so here we are coming at it with different views and quite strongly held views. And yet, for both organizations and the leadership and individuals in both organizations, we valued Christian unity more. That we as Christians have to be able to stand side by side and be able to talk about these things, because we are fellow believers. We all need to be modeling the humility of Christ. And Hugh Ross and the other leaders at Reasons to Believe, I respect their humility and their Christian faith so much, even while we disagree about evolution and about how to interpret the Bible. But these are wonderful leaders of faith. And so Christian unity does not mean uniformity. We don't all have to think exactly the same thing. Yeah, isn't that Christian
That's
unity?
a good quote.
Christian unity does not mean uniformity. It does mean that we're united in bonds of fellowship as fellow family of God, fellow children of God. It means that we share the core of our faith, that we follow Jesus Christ, that we see him as our only hope, our only Lord and Savior, the only one that can save us from our sins and bring us into new life. That's the core. We have to hold firm to that. I was just talking with a pastor yesterday of a church, and I loved how he said it. He said at their church, they nurture curiosity about what we don't know while standing firm in what we do know. They nurture curiosity about what we don't know while standing firm in what we do know. And that curiosity is fundamentally humility. You come at it like, teach me. I want to learn. I don't know yet. What can I learn? And there's a joy in it, in that humble curiosity. And I think that's a great thing we can aspire to ourselves and nurture in each other and build communities where we can be humble and curious about the world around us, about the natural world, about people who hold other perspectives. Well, let's learn what that is. It's been fascinating for us to learn more about the perspective of this other organization, Reasons to Believe, to come to understand it better, to realize we had misconceptions we didn't fully understand. We thought they had this view, and it turns out we were wrong. Oh, okay, so now we understand their view better. To be able to describe somebody else's position that you disagree with in a way that they would consider to be accurate, that is a spiritual discipline that requires a lot of humility, a respect for the other position. Can you at least articulate what they believe and why they believe it, even if you disagree? And doing that, you come to see greater areas of agreement. You don't have to change your view, though, to have a better conversation in the church. And so we need these better conversations. The young people need it. They need to hear leaders being willing to say, I don't know, and tell me more, and let's learn and work on this together. One of the things our young people need to see us modeling that. I'm sorry I'm going on here a long time, but I feel so passionately about this family of issues.
I love it. You go, girl.
So I think you're probably familiar with some of the research from the Barna group that was in the book You Lost Me, how so many of the young people who are leaving the church, they at least a third of them would say the reason was that the church wasn't open to their deepest questions. And when I talk to parents and pastors about science, a lot of them feel like, oh, okay, well, I didn't do very well in science in school. I'm not sure what to say. I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing. I just don't know this stuff. And I'm like, that's okay. You don't have to know the science to have a great question with a teenager, a great conversation with a teenager. You can say to them, well, let's read about it together. Let's talk about it. And you can model for them what it means to be a humble, curious Christian who wants to learn about it, and point them to resources and have that conversation. And that's what will hold a young person in the faith, as they say, like, wow, the church does want to talk about these questions. This is a place where I can wrestle with these issues and still have my faith intact at the end of the day. And have my faith deeper at the end of the day. Okay, and let me just make one more point here. The people people we see coming to BioLogos who are engaging these questions, they actually come through to the other side having their faith strengthened. And this was true in my own life. Having a deeper understanding of the Bible, having a deeper encounter with God, of having a greater desire to learn about God's world. And they come through that with a richer understanding of how to worship God with their mind as well as their heart, of bringing together their workday science Monday through Friday with their Sunday worship in a holistic way where they can now see themselves as whole persons who are following God and worshiping Jesus Christ. These are the things that can come out of investigating these scientific questions. So it doesn't lead you away from faith. It can lead you to a deeper faith.
That is awesome.
Oh, man. We want to be, obviously conscious of your time here. And I'll be honest, we have tons more questions. So we would love to have you back in the future if you're interested. I think we just touched the tip of the iceberg on this one.
Oh yeah, we just dipped our little pinky toe in here.
I would love to come back sometime.
Oh, that'd be great. Before we let you go, though, what is the best place that people can go to get a hold of your book and some of the other resources that you've put out there?
Oh, sure. So our website is biologos.org, biologos.org. And on our website, you can find our blog. So we have several people who blog on our site, and you can read their thoughts and reflections. We've had over 300 people write on the BioLogos site, from professional scientists at universities to leading theologians and pastors to students to lay people who are just thinking through these questions. So check out our blog. We also have an online forum where people can come and join the conversation. You can come there and ask your questions, and other people on the forum will share their insights and wisdom, and it's a great place to engage further. There's also a recommended books page where you can see information about books by leaders in our community, and including the book that I wrote, which with my husband, Lauren Haarsma. It's called Origins, and that book is used by a lot of churches, small groups, Christian high schools, some Christian college classrooms, for helping people think through different views that Christians have on issues of creation, design, evolution, human origins. And so it makes for a great discussion book. We also have several other books on our site. Our newest book is How I Changed My Mind About Evolution, and it's evangelicals reflecting on science and faith. So there's science leaders there, but also faith leaders. N.T. Wright is in the book. Jamie Smith is in the book. John Ortberg. And all of them are writing about their encounter with faith and science. Oh, and of course, our founder of BioLogos, Francis Collins, is in that book. Francis Collins is one of the world's leading biologists. He's led the Human Genome Project, and he now directs the National Institutes of Health. And his best-selling book has now been out for 10 years. It's called The Language of God, A Scientist Presents Evidence for Belief. And in that book, he gives his testimony and talks about evolution. It's a wonderful book, especially for scientists and for people who didn't necessarily grow up in the faith, because Francis Collins didn't grow up in the faith either, and he gives his faith journey of how he came to know Jesus as his Savior. So those are a few of our resources. We also have events around the country. We have a new speakers bureau. If you would like to have a BioLogos speaker come to your event, just come to our website and you can fill out a form to request a speaker and see events that are happening all around the country.
Man, thank you so much for this. This has been a real treat for us. We're nerding out all over the place over here.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I would love to talk more and hear more of your questions. So
that would be wonderful.
We'll definitely make that happen.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and we're excited to send tons and tons of people over to BioLogos, and hopefully they'll get edified just as you said they would, and we know they will.
Wonderful. Good. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a great time.
Thank you so much, Deb. We had a blast, and we'll be talking to you again soon.
Okay, great.
All right. Take care.
Okay, bye.
And all I ever wanted was to be like you. I bought into
Oh boy.
Goodness me.
So I finally got to talk about dark matter and dark energy on a podcast, and it
Dude,
made
your
sense.
nerd glow right now.
Well, in the middle of it, I had to restrain myself because she was like, "Yeah, I don't have the percentages right off the top of my head." And I was going to be like, 26 to 27%, depending on which study you look at.
Yeah.
For dark matter. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah, like, because she's way smarter than I am, and I'm not about to sit here and be like, "Well, I know percentages."
Yeah. I've got you. I'm waiting to trip you up.
Yeah. But I just thought her answers, just in the way that she views science and how it absolutely does not contradict faith, but rather informs it. I thought was just really cool when she was talking about when we got into Big Bang Theory and you know, the formation of the universe and stuff like that, and just kind of her mindset. And she's like, well, of course, God would have to do it some way, right? So
Right.
why not the Big Bang?
Yeah, like who cares? That's just a word anyway.
Yeah, it's just a theory.
And you know, I loved when you were getting her all up into the multiverse like theories, man.
Yeah.
Dude, watching you do this interview may have been my favorite part of the entire interview. I wish you guys could have all seen John just grinning ear to ear,
bouncing
like
up and
the
down on my
Joker.
chair.
And then you know what else I love about her is like the passion that comes through. The same with pretty much everybody we've interviewed, but like, you know, it's almost like the scientists, you know, Catherine Hayhoe and Deb, and it's amazing that this passion
Yeah.
for discovery fuels their theological passion, and the two just dance. They don't care which one leads. If, you know,
Yeah.
science contradicts something that they had seen or heard about theologically, they go back and they open that up and go, well, what else could this be? Because,
Yeah.
you know, science is pretty dead on here. So they let themselves remain open, and they let science and faith become these dance partners
Absolutely.
instead of these sparring partners. And the passion and the excitement and the enthusiasm is so infectious.
Yeah, and it's absolutely just kind of like you're sitting at your dining room table and doing a puzzle, and that satisfaction you get from finding the right piece that fits. You know what I mean? And
You're like, oh, ah!
yes, you know, it just fits so perfectly. And for me, that was always philosophy in college. I was always told, you know, by my Christian conservative friends, like, oh no, man, philosophy is like witchcraft. You know,
I want to punch them all in the face right now.
No, philosophy gives us the language. You know,
Oh, dude.
and I feel the same way about science. Science just gives us kind of, and we're going to talk to a guest here. We have an interview coming up that I think you guys will really like.
I love that distinction you just made, though, that philosophy gives us the language.
Yes.
That's so spot on, man. Like,
Thanks.
the cool part about doing this whole podcast is like getting to talk to all these people from all these different fields and really kind of stepping back and getting to talk to you about it and realizing like the role that all these things have to play in this big dance of life. And philosophy is the language. I mean, I think of this quote from Bertrand Russell once said that something like, philosophy helps us live in uncertainty without being paralyzed
Yes.
by uncertainty.
Yeah.
Because it gives us language with which to, you know, deal with the fact that we know we don't know.
Yeah.
And a lot of that came through in Dr. Haarsma.
Oh,
and
100%.
everything that she was talking about. So, spot on, man.
Yeah, I think science does much the same thing where you get, and this is what I was I think kind of getting at with this guest that we can't talk about yet, but this really great guest that we have coming up that we'll drop more information on later. But in talking about just the essence of God and how you can never truly know something that exists outside of time and space and
Right.
something that was beyond creation.
Right.
You can only get an idea. You know, God reveals Himself in little instances throughout time and space. So I think it all fits together so beautifully.
So good.
I can't wait for you guys to hear that one too. But
So good. And the music on this one is special. It's actually coming from someone who's a listener and someone who has actually had their music featured in BioLogos in the past. He's become a friend of ours. His name's Clay. I think it's Kirkenbauer.
I'm glad you attempted that.
Clay, I've never actually
Sorry,
heard you
buddy.
say your last name, and we have spoke. So
Yeah.
if that's wrong, you can just slap me. Everybody mispronounces my name as well, so we're brothers from another mother in that vein. But the music in this whole episode is from Clay, and he's a musician. I think he used to be a worship pastor, and is continuing to make this beautiful music. And the song we're going to close with here is a song inspired by his own deconstruction in realizing that, you know, he can essentially fit theology and science into a dance that work together. And that realization made him realize that to someone who was raised kind of more fundamentalist and was told that you can't believe things like billions of years and you can't believe things like the Big Bang, he realized that a cool way of thinking about it is it's not just 14 billion years of cold, dead space, but if God is an agent, if there is a love, an active relational love at the center of all this, then this is 14 billion years of love.
Yeah.
And that's what the song's about. So it's pretty cool. So enjoy it. Thank you, Clay, for letting us use the music. And what else we got?
Yeah, just as always, if you like the music, please go out and check it out. Most of our musicians, just like Clay's, music is available on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Apple Music. So go check it out. And like I said, if you like it, bug them on social media. Tell them we sent you.
Abso-freaking-lutely. And all that'll be in the show notes. Cool, man. That was awesome.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Your nerd glow. It's so great. I love it.
Can't help it.
All right, well, we love you guys. Thanks for letting us do what we do and joining us in this conversation. Keep floating guests our way. We've been getting lots of great ideas from all of you guys, so please keep sending us ideas for musicians, ideas for guests, ideas for ideas, ideas about ideas, just ideas. Just keep them coming. We're having a blast doing this, and we love connecting with you all.
Yeah, and other than that, you guys have no idea. September is going to be a really cool month for everybody. So we got
kinds of good stuff.
We got stuff in the pocket.
It's almost like we're on a mission from God or something.
Feels that way.
Cue up the Blues Brothers soundtrack right now. All right, we love you guys. And for now, we are your hosts. I am Adam Narlock.
And I'm John Williamson.
Keep deconstructing, everybody.
An explosion of the finest kind. All matter, energy, space, and time. And the universe was born. Grace and laws of heaven that were set in place, set to govern just our finite space. For humanity's sake, lights in the sky from your hand and your mind, holding us close. Please don't let go. Everyone was made to feel 14 billion years of love. Hope when it seemed that all we had was lost. There was order disguised as chaos. And a planet was born. Life in the mountains underneath our feet. Every molecule our lungs can breathe. In perfect symmetry. Lights in the sky. Everyone was made to feel 14 billion years of love. Love. When a man was sent to take our place, and the father had to hide his face and let go.